Schmendrick. You Potz.
Entschuldigt mir,
Jutz.
Schlemiel.
Schmazel. Schmeckel. Schwan. Get cooking up from you.
Hello.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, and by the way, your pronunciation of on Chaimie was outstanding.
Thank you very much. I worked on that for a very long time.
Well,
I
it
was going to say
shows.
thanks for playing that clip because I never get tired of hearing how we call you a schmeckule.
We should explain what happened there in that episode. Why is he hurling insults at you in Yiddish?
Because we go to meet him at Just for Laughs backstage, and I actually sneeze on him. It's not recommended.
No.
But my character just does the worst thing. He's the most socially awkward character in the Yiddish world.
Set up the show a little bit for listeners. I mean, give us a little bit of context. What's it about, if it's about anything at all?
Well, it's about extremely important things like God, religion, spirituality, identity, and culture, and about more important things like bagels, poutine, and smoked meat. Not necessarily in that order.
And you argue a lot, the two of you.
Don't get us started, but
We're getting along so far, and it's only the first 5 minutes of our day together.
yeah, there's
so
been
we
no
don't
coffee
wanna...
actually.
Yeah, that is
so
dangerous
this is
for
some
everyone
risky
involved here.
business.
But tell me about the sorts of dilemmas that the two characters find themselves in as they travel through Montreal.
Well, they are best friends and debating adversaries. This comes from a long-standing Jewish tradition called Chevruta, where two people hit the arguments from opposite sides of the spectrum and dissect it from every possible angle. And Chevruta actually comes from the word chaver, which is friendship. So there is friendship there, but we also disagree on everything. And occasionally he can be very annoying, like when he sneezes on Howie and other sort of socially awkward things that he does. But the show is a commentary on religion and identity and spirituality in the modern secular world, in the Mile End, in Montreal, where these secular and religious worlds tend to bump up against each other.
Right. And you are, to say the least, irreverent when it comes to Judaism and dealing with Jewish tradition. For instance, being in a sex shop, wearing a negligee while eating matzah.
Oh, that is a Jewish tradition.
Is it?
We created that Jewish
I
tradition
missed
recently.
that part of the Seder. I must have been away.
Yeah, you have to come early. Yes, we definitely take an irreverent tone with a lot of it, but I think that we get away with it, so to speak, because we are somewhat knowledgeable in these topics, because we grew up in this area called Côte Saint-Luc in Montreal, and we had this Jewish education from when we were wee pishers, if you will, until outside of high school, we're unfurled on the greater region of Montreal. But we are fairly knowledgeable in Jewish-related stuff, and so that comes out in the content, and we're sort of regurgitating our Jewish education in very unintended ways. And I think for that reason, there's actually been we actually expected more opprobrium from the Jewish community, and actually they're big fans. So what we really enjoy about it is the fact that the community is happy to have themselves poked fun at because it's done in this loving way, because clearly we are from it.
Right. And where does your Yiddish come from? Because this is, I mean, you both grew up speaking Yiddish, Chaimie?
I'd say Yiddish generally comes from the Kishkas, which is Yiddish for colon.
Is that a chain of mountains in New York?
The Kishka Mountains...
You'll find yourself playing there soon.
There's an ancient Jewish tribe from the Kishka Mountains in New York State. And that's not true. We actually went to a high school in Montreal called Bialik, which is one of the few high schools in the world that taught Yiddish. Montreal is one of the last sort of bastions of a true Yiddish community. There's Yiddish theater there. There's a Yiddish public library. The producers, the play Mel Brooks musical, the musical producers was just on in Montreal in Yiddish. So it has that flavor to the city. In fact, Yiddish was the third most spoken language in Montreal about 100 years ago.
Wow.
And we were taught it in that Jewish day school system. Ellie also had it growing up in the home, me less so. I don't want to kill it for the listeners, so we're faking some of it, but we work with some very, very good people, academics and
therapists,
and also Ellie's father.
And there's a big effort to keep. I mean, the language is alive and well in Montreal, but in other places, I mean, there's a concerted effort to try to keep Yiddish alive. And so when you're speaking Yiddish in this series, do more observant, more Orthodox Jews, more traditional Jews say, well, at least they're speaking Yiddish. They're reinforcing the language. They're keeping the language alive.
It's interesting because I'm not sure if the Orthodox Jews have that opinion of this show. But from what we've heard, they really like it. But the reality is that I think in many cases they can't admit that they like it. So the beauty of YouTube, we consider this like Yiddish pornography, if you will, because the beauty of YouTube is that it can be enjoyed in the privacy of your own home.
Right.
Without it being a public event necessarily. So we've actually gotten a lot of good feedback. Actually, quite honestly, there's been a lot of good feedback from the ultra-Orthodox community that have seen it and have a sense of humor about it. I think that there is a movement to preserve Yiddish. I think it's actually coming from a more, let's call it a left-wing secular group.
Right.
That is actually more of an academic group or more of a fringe group that's making more of the effort to really go in and try to keep the language, the literary tradition. Because a lot of the ultra-Orthodox, it's very much a verbal street language, and it's not something that is made for the consumption of high literature.
Right.
But on the academic side, people like Shalom Aleichem that are studied as writers, that there are many academics that base their theses on his work and want to continue that sort of work. So they're happy with us with this. But what's interesting is that there's debate about the quality of our Yiddish. And no two Yiddishists can agree on what is proper Yiddish. And part of it is because sometimes a lot of Yiddish draws on German. About 80% of it is German. Some of it is Hebrew. Some of it has Slavic terms. Some of it incorporates North Americanisms. So it's very hard to decide in terms of vocabulary, well, are you going to choose the German word for this? Or are you going to choose the Polish word for this? Are you going to choose the Hebrew word for this that's Yiddishized? Yeah. So, and
are we
that's
going
a matter
to
of taste.
alienate people, Yiddishists, by creating our own Yiddish terminology, like naked zelbi, which we coined, which is naked selfie? I don't know if we're alienating the Yiddishists when we do that, though.
I'd like to think that we're adding to the canon. We're on top of the Yiddish mountain.
Now that you said Yiddish pornography on cue, I think you set a new bar.
Yeah,
for,
I could leave.
The level of disrespect that we're going to get when we get off this show. Okay.
Do you, through that though, and as irreverent as the show might get, do you feel a responsibility that you're keeping a cultural tradition alive though? I mean, through the debate, through the Talmudic tradition of debate.
Yeah, we do, but it's not. I would say it's less a matter of trying to keep it alive or trying to preserve it, and more a matter of it's in our DNA whether we like it or not. I guess we're sort of pointing to that a little bit in the actual content of some of the episodes, which is that even my character, who is nothing like me, Chaimie, They
can't see your face on radio.
Well, better for everyone, probably.
Yeah, that is true.
Watch your mouth. Shash still for a little more Yiddish here, is that he can't help himself but take a Talmudic approach to things. So, for example, we do an episode where we're talking about bagels, and we're actually even making fun a little bit of the Hasidic Jews that we see walking through the Mile End and their garb, and talking about how can they wear these heavy clothes and the black hats and everything in the dead of summer, and just some of the sort of how do they pick apart the nuances of all these little meaningless things? And we're sort of seemingly mocking them until you realize in the next scene that this is how we approach the minutia and trivialities of life, like which is the better bagel, St. Viator or Fairmount. Which your listeners don't want to necessarily hear us get into this right now, but we can talk about the temperature of the dough, the quality of the wood burning in the oven, the consistency and bounce back of the dough, the ratio, of course, of honey to water. And, basically we're them whether we want to be or not. So like Ellie said, it is a love letter to our upbringing, even though we're often ripping it apart.
And are the characters, I mean, are they reflections of yourself? Do you, Ellie, are you the more religious person? Are you the person who is more observant?
I'm observant of Jamie's behavior. Not necessarily. Actually, in real life, I think that Chaimie and I are pretty philosophically aligned. And what you see, though, is on the right-wing side, it's the right-wing pieces of Chaimie and myself that are inevitably in us. And on the left-wing side, that character is the composite of our left-wing pieces. And I think that's part of the idea, is that the YidLife Crisis is actually, we use two characters, but the reality is for everyone, it should be in their head. It's kind of the equivalent of the devil and the angel that are on your shoulders, although we're not saying good and evil, we're saying two sides of a spectrum. that you have to somehow compromise and create an identity that's somewhere in the middle of these two things.
But is it? I mean, you kind of talk around religion. Is it about religion? Is it about Judaism, JD?
No, we've always said that as much as it's possibly one of the Jewiest things ever created, or at least in the YouTube
Except
age.
for this actual show.
Well, this is the
Today's show.
Today's show with Howie and
brought to you by
yeah.
the Jews.
Jews and Q's.
Vic Cohen,
for
Schmilko.
CBC. Yeah, it's a very Jewy, Q-y show today. We appreciate that you set it up like that. But no, we've always said from the beginning that this is not about Judaism. We're looking at the world through a Jewish lens. In fact, we once got a compliment that I took very personally from a rabbi in Montreal who is a fluent Yiddish speaker who, when we were talking about the quality of our Yiddish and how some people sort of take offense at this or pick it apart a little bit, he said, these guys, Yiddish is not just a language, it's a way of looking at the world. And in that, these guys are fluent. And that's because, like I said, it's in our DNA. So the show is to us not about Judaism. It is about all religion, all dogma, all fundamentalism and extremism. I would say that, I'll leave you out of it for now, buddy, but I'm an anti-extremist.
Okay.
And so what we're picking on is sort of the dogma of both sides in a way, even to the point that, for example, in our very first episode, where maybe I win the argument, the secular argument, but then he has offended me so much by separating the poutine into its component parts and refusing to eat the cheese with the sauce that offends me and then I'm unable to eat. So there's dogma on the left and the right. We're picking on dogmatics.
But I think we're firm believers in Seinfeldism.
Right.
And the whole approach of what we do is that level of Seinfeldian minutia to analyze things, whether it's religious material or it's unreligious and purely foodie material. We're taking that same approach.
But do you ever find yourselves wading into dangerous territory?
We don't find ourselves for the most part.
I'd say working together is dangerous, especially without the coffee. Now, I mean, we've tried to do some things that we know are a little bit controversial to make a point. You mentioned our Passover episode, and I'll ruin the punchline for most of your listeners who have not seen it yet. We have a Hasidic, ultra-Orthodox Jewish couple who are kissing, two men. Mm-hmm. That is, I'd say, pushing up against the lines of what most Jews would say is, okay, there's a certain amount of controversy in it, but we're not doing it.
The two of you do end up bound together in leather at the end.
We do. We do.
Also that. I think we're going to hell for numerous reasons now that I think about it.
Luckily for us, it doesn't exist. Except for when we shared a hotel room that time.
Yeah, it's here on Earth.
Okay.
We've been there.
One bathroom between us is hell on Earth. Anyways, no, we don't do it to be controversial. We do it because we're really trying to work through these issues. And one of the great things is that we've heard from people, including people on the ultra-Orthodox or Orthodox spectrum, or people who have tried to separate themselves from that community, that it actually helps them work through some of this stuff to see us being able to make fun of it and laugh at it. I'd say that's our approach.
Would you actually eat matzah even before Passover began?
Yeah, totally. It's a phenomenal cracker.
It's not. It's tasteless. It's constipation
I know.
inducing.
It's me.
Yes.
In a cracker.
I'm not saying that you're tasteless.
I am consuming my own self, and it is delicious.
You've caused constipation in me as well.
I want to try to recreate the poutine debate if we can. Not with poutine, though, but can we get you to go at each other in Yiddish a little bit on the topic of smoked meat on lean or fat?
I mean,
could you take that on?
That's a big Yiddish demand. I can make an intellectual Anglophone argument for the schmaltz side.
Ich kann nicht essen das Schmalz. Bämis?
Bämis.
Ich hab lieb die Linz. Nicht mit die Mädlich. Okay?
All right. Everyone at home, go home. Go to your Yiddish translating app.
No, I don't want them to know what I just said.
Don't worry, there is not a
What did you just say?
I was making a case for lean smoked meat.
Okay.
I think you still get the flavor. You don't need the extra calories.
Right.
And oftentimes, what do you really want? I know people who bite into the sandwich and it's all schmaltz. There's no meat in there. It's just fat. To me, that's not the essence of the meat. You can still get a good meat. You want to go medium? I'm fine with medium. But people who go in there and ask for extra fat, I don't understand that.
Ollie?
The cup is filled with schmaltz.
Mine?
Your head is
Yeah.
full of fat. And I mean that in the best way possible because our brains are composed of fatty tissue. So to deny yourself the opportunity to eat fat in that pure format in the schmaltz that you
Wilde
find in
Chaya.
smoked meat
Wilde Chaya!
is to deny yourself mental nutrition. And frankly, my friend, you could use it.
Okay. Dein Kopf in der Erd. Because he's speaking of head. So this is actually an ancient Yiddish expression, which means I would like your head in the earth.
Which I guess used to be a thing that you would put heads kind of like ostriches. They would go down into the earth. I think that there was a lot of superstition in Galicia back then.
Gekaken Tiffinyam, Cheverman.
Oh,
we
that
can't
sounded
translate
bad.
that here.
It
Yeah,
is what
but
it sounded
is.
like.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eee.
Okay.
Why is so much of Yiddish just ways to describe people and their less flattering
The
characteristics?
bodily. Well, because I think there's a certain sense of, when Jews curse each other out, they go to the sort of most shameful, disgusting things we could think of, and that would be our bodies usually, especially if it's me and Ellie on a sweaty Toronto morning.
I would like to thank you both so much for being here. It's a great pleasure to meet you, and thanks for, as we said, keeping up the theme in this hour of the program.
A großen Dank.
Thank you very much.